Hey there, folks. It's 7:41 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, November the 26th. They tell us it's 2022, but we'll see. I wanted to have kind of some fun today, and I think all these videos are fun. I have fun. Even when I'm pissed, I have fun. Maybe when I'm pissed, I have the most fun. Who knows? But this video today was actually... it was prompted by a conversation that I had pretty recently. We were having to get a new car for my wife, and we're doing the test drive, and the salesman's in the back seat. And I just ask people questions, just benign questions, because I kind of want to know things about them, always. So I asked him if he was from around here. That's a pretty normal one I typically do, just to see what, because what'll happen is they'll tend to tell you a lot more about themselves just from that question. You from around here? And then they get to talk about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. And I'm not saying that in an egotistical way, like everybody is just so self-absorbed, but people do. They like to talk about themselves. So anyways, he tells me no. He says, yeah, actually he was born and lived in the area, so about the Grand Rapids, Michigan-ish, area, until he was about 7. Then he moved to Germany and lived in an old city in Germany from that point forward until he was, an adult, and then he moved back. And has lived here since. And I'm continuing to make conversation. I said, that sounds pretty great to be able to see, live in, experience that city, and I never even paid a lot of attention to the architecture around me, to be perfectly honest with you, until more recently. I don't think a lot of people do. And I just kind of mentioned, what great architecture would be in that city and everything. I'm not going to mention the city because I don't want to mention so much to where anybody could figure out, oh, I know who this person is. Not that you'd want to, but just for the sake of, some privacy. Anyways. And he said, yeah, oh yeah, it's because I thought, wow, that'd be great. There are lots of old, beautiful buildings there and so on and so forth. And he said, yeah. He goes, really, people don't really think like here, all the old buildings we have. And this is him talking, 300 years. I think he said 300 years, which is kind of a stretch, because if you actually look into the claimed history of most of the beautiful and magnificent buildings in North America, they don't go back that far. Most of them, 1800s, is what they claim. Not all, but most. A lot. And really beautiful, ornate, just massively impressive structures. The lion's share. But he says, yeah, 300 years, but, this place, and this would count for most of Germany, really, 800, 900 years. And I'm just sitting in the front seat. And of course, I'm not going to respond because I was there to buy a car. I'm not there to wake him up. And we continued, But that was funny, because why would he say that? Well, the big reason why he or anyone else would say that is because they were told that. You can't particularly tell by the beauty and ornate features, the grandiosity of the buildings between North America and we'll just say Europe for argument's sake. I mean, there are other portions of the world that have beautiful architecture, most of them in ruins and not nearly as prolific as Europe. North America, when I say Europe, I'm also including, of course, Moscow and those beautiful parts of Russia. So just mostly those two places, and various islands and such in between. why do we think that? Why do we think so much of that was 900 years, 900 years ago built? But all of this beautiful, beautiful architecture in North America that is oftentimes a mirror reflection of much of the architecture over in Europe, only a few hundred years old. Again, we would say that because we would think, oh, it would have to be that old, but they don't even claim it's that old most of the time. Most of the time. Couple hundred tops. And it's a mirror reflection. Well, how do we know that the stuff in Europe is that old, but the stuff in North America isn't that old? Because they told us so. We were told that. That's it. We were told it was only, the stuff in North America, it was only, most of it, tops, few hundred years. And if we get before that, they start just basically showing us dilapidated, shitty ruins of, and oftentimes things that you look at it and you say, this was never a building. This wasn't something that someone intended to build. It's a pile of rocks. This is horse shit. So, how do we know for sure? Because they told us. Well, how do they date these things? Well, they date it based on an arbitrary edict of what buildings at a certain time in a certain place looked like. What style of architecture and design they used, what style of, you could say, maybe the ornate woodwork or stonework inside or outside, the sculptures, blah, 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 blah. All arbitrary, all by edict, nothing scientific. Nothing. There are no pure, undebatable, I should say, concrete scientific ways that they can tell you that those things that, let's say the buildings in America are only a few hundred years old, the ones that oftentimes they're mirror images of the beautiful cathedrals, the cathedrals of Europe, the cathedrals of Europe, the cathedrals of North America are breathtaking. So how do they date them? Well, they tell you how old they are. Because they can't scientifically date the stone that's in these things. They can't scientifically date when the stone was cut, when it is cut, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and sometimes it gets into the realm of stupid and not very believable. They can't even date the mortar because there's no sure way they have of dating the mortar. The mortar is all basically minerals, sand, water. If there was an accelerant used, is there even any traces left after a certain time? And how could you pinpoint where, when, and how that was done? How could you say beyond a reasonable doubt that the brickwork or wherever else mortar is used, maybe in like cobblestone work, that it wasn't in some way tuck pointed and replaced? You can't. Because you can't date the mortar. You can't date the, did I just say bricks? I'm sorry, stones. And then I said stones, then mortar. Bricks, you can't. Again, you date bricks based on arbitrary edicts of how old a brick is. You go to web pages, you go to sources of people who are professionals in dating bricks, because a lot of people work in antique bricks, and antique bricks can be very expensive. Yeah, very expensive. And let's just say if there were markers that told you if a brick was antique or not, and someone was very talented, they could reproduce bricks that appear to be antique and charge good money for them. This happens all the time. The counterfeiting of all sorts of things that are supposed to be antique, that are supposed to be extraordinarily old. Why? Why do people get away with this all the time? Because it's so hard to impossible to scientifically date so many materials, and not just stone and the mortar and the brick. Wood. Even the woodwork found in a lot of structures. Well, what about if we have like a lot of gypsum, lath and plaster, or sheets like sheetrock? Well, again, we're talking about essentially, for the most part, minerals and water. So if you can't positively, beyond a shadow of a doubt, cite exactly where that came from and when, again, okay, what about glass? So again, you can't date that. And glass, you say, well, over a long period of time, maybe like bricks, and brick fading, or what they claim should be the rate of brick fading, is not universal. It's not common across the board. If brick fades, it could fade for different reasons in different places. And if it was kept up and it was taken care of, and if it happened to be well shaded or just guarded from a lot of the elements, there's not going to be much fading that's going to happen over a really long period of time. And there's a lot of assumption that comes with that as well, this fading of brick. Obviously, brick can fade depending, and I would assume that a lot of the fading might have much to do with the way that the brick was made. Not just the particular clay that's used, but the way the brick was made and the way it was fired. There's different methods of firing, of course, than you have your mud bricks as compared to your clay bricks, but you can't positively identify the age of either. They'll tell you things to look for. You can look for the name of the manufacturer in the frog or the indentation in the brick. Again, something that could be faked. And again, if we're talking about manufacturers that are old enough and they're not currently still around, so they're manufacturers, let's say, down the memory hole hundreds of years ago, sometimes there's really no way to absolutely positively prove that those companies were they who manufactured certain specific bricks that might have a certain specific name stamped in the frog of the brick. You basically see where I'm going with this. This is what people who have attacked the so-called science of archaeology, this is where they really strike that hurts the so-called science of archaeology so much. Because they point out that it's all by edict. If they find something at a dig site and you can trust that they actually found it there and didn't plant it there, which I am convinced happens more often than not. But if they actually did really authentically find something there, and you believe that that you can trust that they found something there, then whatever they found there is again quite circular. It's again by edict. We found pottery fragments, and based on the fragment, the style of it, what was used, how it was shaped, we're dating it in this era because we say that it was this era that made pottery in this way from these clays in this shape and fired it like this and glazed it like that. Nothing scientific. It's all by edict. And what I was going to say about the glass and stained glass, so if they claim that there was fading out through weathering, or especially from sun on stained glass or any glass and glass panes, they're not the hardest thing to replace. And in fact, perhaps much of the, or many of the claims concerning when they say they built certain buildings was really just the time that it took to renovate those buildings, including window panes, in some but not all cases, the wooden sashes, because if you take care of wood, if you take care of it, if you keep it from getting pest infestations, if you keep it from being harmed by the weather through either bad building techniques or just not doing proper maintenance on it as far as keeping paint or any sorts of finishes on it, and annually going over all the wood, especially the exterior of the structure, going over it, scraping old paint that needs to be scraped, loose paint that needs to be scraped, doing any fillings that might need to be done. If you had carpenter bees that got to it, fill those things, resand certain areas, repaint it. That wood, those exterior portions of wood, can last indefinitely. Indefinitely. So again, how do we know how old these things are? Because they said so. And who are they? Are they our friends? Are they our peers? Are they just regular people who, like our ancestors, all got together and decided to put off the shackles of their colonist lords and create this great new nation? And it just got corrupted from that time. It just got corrupted. That's all. This wasn't a slave colony from the start. It's just that regular folks just decided they wanted to put off the old slave masters in Europe so they could become the new slave masters here. And I don't mean slave masters as in one race over the other. I mean slave masters as in certain people over everyone. So, if you want to believe that story, that's fine. You really, all your evidence that you have for keeping up this status quo idea of America, and there are people out there that claim to be twoofers who actually do work very hard at keeping up the status quo of the story of America, just know that these people have to use all of the claims and materials that are very energetically defended by the establishment themselves. And that right there is not the end of the story, but is a very big red flag. All the datings of all of these things, all of it comes back to I said so. And I know that because, for one thing, I live right near Grand Rapids, and it's one city out of many in America east of the Mississippi wherein you can find some of the most old, gorgeous, and variegated examples of architecture in one place. It is beautiful. The architecture throughout Michigan's beautiful, and it's not the most impressive in North America east of the Mississippi. Not even close, not that I'm aware of. Because the further east you get towards the ocean, and look, don't get me wrong, there are amazingly impressive structures in Michigan, in northern Indiana, in Illinois, in these places. So I'm not trying to denigrate the structures here. Really, there's some unbelievably beautiful structures. But I'm saying they're not the nicest, and I see them now all the time, and every time I see these supposed cathedrals, church buildings, these supposed government buildings, these what are supposed to be just dilapidated old factories from just 100 years ago, but there's so much more to them. I'm impressed every time. It's amazing. So if you do a search, and maybe anyone just does a Google search on the oldest buildings in the world. Here you go. I got a page up right now. It says the oldest buildings in the world. And they're going to tell us about the 9 oldest buildings in the world. And of course we can trust them because I got this through a Google search, and everybody knows that you can trust everything that Google pops up for you. So let's look at the 9 oldest buildings in the world. This was like one of the first results that actually came up when I did this search. And you know what? Let's read their few paragraphs to get our brains ready to accept this nonsense, okay? Our early human ancestors were nomadic for thousands of years. I can't. All right, I'll keep going. They were nomadic for thousands of years. They couldn't figure out what the hell to do. For thousands of years, they wandered around like idiots. Before the first true civilizations began in Mesopotamia. So wait a minute. Let me get this straight. Because, you've all gone, I'm sure you guys have gone out there, you've been in the housing market or you want to move to a new neighborhood, right? So you go out there and you look around, right? You gotta look around. So that our ancestors have been wandering around the world for thousands of years. After all that time, where did they think was a good spot to plant the first civilization? Fucking Mesopotamia. Sorry, I didn't see that coming. I didn't read the propaganda first. That's some funny stuff right there. Anyways. As people began settling down because they ran out of energy drinks and cocaine. That's why they ended up in Mesopotamia, because they'd been wandering around for thousands of years just drinking energy drinks and snorting cocaine. Mesopotamia is where they hit rock bottom and decided maybe it's time for us to settle down, eh? Okay. Jesus. As people began settling down, they started to construct more permanent structures or buildings. Oh, hell. The oldest existing buildings date back to the beginning of civilization. No scientific ways of doing this, but we're pretty damn sure. And we put it in some books, so you gotta believe it. These old buildings were constructed with sturdy materials and were often renovated while they were still in use, which has contributed to their longevity. And once you see some of these places, you're going to say, because I said, where the hell are the renovations? And why didn't they make anything any better? I can't help it. It's so fucked up. Okay, so today all of these buildings are important to crafting the narrative. Sorry. They're all important archaeological sites, and some are open to the public as popular tourist destinations. Fuck yeah. Gonna make some money. Since we've covered the oldest structures, temples, and pyramids before, and I gotta see that, these buildings have mostly been omitted from the list, and you're gonna see why. Instead, we chose to focus on buildings a structure with a roof and walls. So that's what they're constituting as a building, that were meant to be used by living people. Long hyphen tombs were also not included. That's good, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. Number 9. Year built. This is the Van Fortress. Year built between 8th and 7th centuries BCE. So I believe that every building that we're going to see in this list of the top 9 is going to get older and older according to them. Now, location, Van Province, Turkey. Oh, just in time for Thanksgiving. The purpose is as a fortress. The purpose is a fortress. Still standing, partially, mostly in ruins. You don't say. Now, I don't even know if I can get, I would like actually, well, let me see if I can do this. Just for anybody watching, maybe get a bigger image. Yeah, I could do this. I mean, the image was pretty big on, but I'll put it, there it is, nice and big on screen, okay. So I'm going to read the little bit that they said about it, okay. Below, the Van Fortress or Van Citadel, which was built by the ancient kingdom of Urartu in modern-day Turkey, is considered to be the most impressive and largest fortress of its kind. I think they should have changed the syntax of that. By the ancient kingdom of Urartu in modern-day Turkey. Okay. And there's no comma after the built. Okay. It's considered to be the most impressive and largest fortress of its kind. You're kidding me. The Urartu kingdom was known for building several fortresses throughout its territory. The oldest part of the fortress, the Sadur Tower, was built during the 8th century BCE. So that's before Common Era. In addition, so they basically AD, BC, most of you know this, BC, BCE, it's all dated on when they said a guy named Jesus, who was supposed to be the savior of the world, was born. That's how they date everything, which to me is suspicious too. However, in addition to being an excellent example of Urartian, can't even pronounce that, building prowess, the Van Fortress contains several records detailing the kingdom's history. So, lucky for us, lucky for the world who's hungry for knowledge, lucky for us, there were records in it telling us about it being built and when. Oh my gosh, how do you get more lucky? That's really lucky. Following the fall of the Urartu kingdom, the Van Fortress was occupied by successive groups such as the Medes, Achaemenids, Armenians, Parthians, Romans, Sassanid, Persians, Byzantines, Arabs, Seljuks, Safavids, Afsharids, Ottomans, and Russians. No kidding. Wow. I can't believe that many people want this place. One of the most interesting artifacts found at Van Fortress is a trilingual inscription of Xerxes the Great of the First Persian Empire, dated 5th century. Whoa! I mean, if the records telling us exactly when it was built wasn't lucky enough, we've got an inscription from Xerxes. Because we know if we find an old inscription of an old building that has records inside of it that tells us how old it is, and if there's an inscription saying it's from Xerxes, it's got to be true. It's got to be true. And look at this. What did they say? Oldest and impressive. This is impressive. What's impressive? I'm trying to figure out what's impressive. I see there's an arch over here that looks like it's made from very nice cut stone. Doesn't seem to match the rest of this. Was that put in for the tourists? Because everything else I'm seeing around here, although there are some very straight cobbly stone walls, probably held together with mortar, and they look okay, decent lines in them and all, I don't even know what the hell is going on up here. It doesn't even really look like it was ever that impressive. I'm just going to be honest. It really doesn't look like it was ever that impressive. If it were, and I don't know what we're looking at here, because I'm really not going to go and look all around this forever. I'm sure there's all kinds of interesting things that I or anybody else honest might find if they went and looked all around this at all of the details. But what I'm seeing here just looks a little shitty. I'm not really impressed, honestly. I mean, obviously, most of this, since it's very cobbly stone looking, a lot of mortar, took somebody a decent amount of time to make the things that we have here. But whatever's going on top of this hill, I don't know what it is. Not impressed by looking at it, okay? If I see something they say is remarkably old and impressive, and it looks like it was literally shat out by a fairy, and I mean the ones with wings, I'm just not that impressed. I don't think it's really all that awesome. So that's me. Let's see the next thing. This is number 8, and I probably won't pronounce this right. Oh, well. The dun, do. How do you pronounce the U with an accent mark? Let's see. It's supposed to be in Galway, so dun. If it's in Galway, Ireland, is it more like dun? It's the dun or dun, don. Oh, I'm not getting my accents right. Eiongasa. I'm sure there's somebody out there from Ireland like, you are just fucking retarded. Dun Eiongasa. Okay, so this is Aran Islands, County Galway, Republic of Ireland, Hill Fort, yes, mostly intact. Okay. Don't know what's going on with all of this crazy looking stuff all over here. These vertical looking stones, pretty interesting. I mean, very cool to look at, right? But again, just cobbled flat stone in successive tiers. Maybe a stairway here at one point in time. Who knows? And who knows exactly for what? They say it was a fortress. Maybe it was. I don't know. But there ain't no way in hell for you to say how old that is or isn't. Not scientifically. They do say the Dún on... Sorry. Like the Din Eiongasa is one of the best preserved forts anywhere in the world. Really. The Cliffside Fort is the largest of all prehistoric forts in the Aran Islands and was built around 1100 BCE because people, of course, were wandering around, drinking energy drinks, doing coke, couldn't be bothered to write anything down. Prehistory. Excavations have revealed that people had been living at the site since 1500 BCE, and that the first version of, I'm not even going to say its name again. I'm not. At the first permanent dwellings were built a few centuries after. One of the most impressive features, and they keep putting that name on there because it's easier to type than say, are the jagged defensive stones known as chevaux de frise. So all of a sudden it becomes French. The jagged defensive. Those are cool. I'm going to say, like, this has nothing to do with their date, but that's pretty cool, right? Because who in the hell is going to get past that? Are they jagged defensive stone? I don't know. And again, a lot of this could be literally what they say. But look, if you had, I could see that's a possibility. There's so many people that give their opinions on things like star forts. There's no way those are forts made for defense. When actually a lot of star forts, you look at them from above and they actually look like they're probably really fucking good for defense. But yeah, I mean, who's going to get past this? And while they're trying to get past this, you just sit up there and bang, bang, just pick them right off. So maybe, that's fine. But that doesn't prove anything regarding how old this is. You can't date those stones. You can't date those stones. You can't date when they were made. You have to take their word for it. I'm sure it probably is very old, or maybe not. I don't know. If you're in Ireland, don't get mad at me. I'm just saying. I don't know, and you don't know either, because there's no scientific way to know. And it's crazy, like every time they want to give us, because they're trying to put this idea in our mind that man evolved. Do you realize that even Christians and people who claim to be creationists absolutely believe that man still had to evolve from the time they were created to today? They think that evolution in a biological way is nonsense. But they think evolution in the sense like they would completely buy. You would have some Christian or creationist reading this and have the first couple of little paragraphs where they said, for the first few thousand years, man just wandered the earth and they didn't know what to do. And they didn't know what to do with themselves. And they just lived in little structures that they built with sticks and leaves. They would believe that. They totally believe that, which is evolution. That's evolution, folks. So this is number 7. It is, I might do better at the pronunciation. It's Su Neroxy in Barumini. I think I almost got that right. Now they say year built 16th century BCE, 1600 years before when they say Jesus was born. Location, Barumini, Sardinia, Italy. Purpose, unknown for sure. Possibly a fort or a palace. If I looked at this thing, I wouldn't know what purpose it served. I would say, was that like an above ground potato cellar? I have no clue. What is that? It's obviously, for the most part, uncut stone all over the place. And it does look pretty roughly cobbled together. You know, maybe its purpose was somebody without tons of money that had quite a bit of time because they weren't being taxed to death. Built it for some very important utilitarian reason. Maybe it was their garage. I don't know. You don't know. But you see these cut stones down here? Look at those. We know we got cut stones down here. I just don't see any cut stones up here, but that's, I don't know what that is, but it's kind of weird to see in this whole mess of cobbled, uncut stone. I'm not going to read all the descriptions on these places because they do kind of tend to be like really repetitive, just, you know. Now the next one we got Nuraghe Santu Antine. I'm going to say Antine because it's in Toralba, Sardinia, Italy. Oh, look at that. Aren't you impressed? Somebody built something in a sort of a cone shape with some really uneven rows of what looks to be partially cut stone all around it. Let's get the purpose. They say, again, 1600 BCE, also in Sardinia. Purpose, unknown for sure. Possibly a fort or a castle. And based on the size of the fence that I'm seeing around there, if this was a castle, I think maybe it was a Smurf castle. Because I don't know who of a regular size might think that that's a fort or a castle. I guess I'd have to see the landscape around it. But again, not impressed. And again, not just forget whether I'm impressed or not. Who gives a shit? But again, no way of telling how old it is. It's because that's what they say. That's what they say. They say because man in this area was only smart enough to maybe build this thing. I think it's interesting that they were smart enough to use enough complex geometry to build a conical shaped quasi tower here in the middle, but then built all this shit show all around it. Anyways, Now, the Palace of Knossos, which is, they claim to be 1950 BCE, Heraclean, Crete, Greece palace. And by the way, everything you're seeing in this photo, a lot of this is actually restoration. So because whoever claims to have unearthed a lot of it also did restoration in a lot of portions of it, it's completely untrustworthy whatsoever, any story you hear about it at all. But the interesting thing about it is that we go from basically Tardville in a lot of the structures that we've seen so far, because they're not impressive. They're not. They're not. To something that they say is hundreds of years earlier, far more impressive. But this helps for us to get the idea that people living in this place, this Greece, were very advanced. So that does help with their story. And now I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I do know that we have cut stones all over what seems to be a foundation here, which I would think, though I'm just from the look at it, I don't know how much they've changed or whatever. Could be foundation. They could have, dug and exposed a foundation here, or not. I can't even tell because I don't have a measure. Like, there's not a guy. We got a guy way over there. And based on the size of these ropes, because usually like these little sticks and ropes only going to come up to your knees, and we don't know how far distance that is. So maybe actually a man standing here would be about this tall. So maybe it was a foundation wall, maybe it wasn't. But weird that so much cut stone and beautiful round, perfectly round, again conical pillars tapering towards the bottom would exist next to a lot of just cobblestone all over here. Beautiful cut stones, very intelligent, nice lines, nice, beautiful, even pillars, cobblestone everywhere. So who knows what you can believe about that. I'm saying you probably can't believe anything, and you can't know when it was built. I'm sorry. Not based on anything present. You have to take somebody's word for it. That's what it comes down to. Same thing here. Oh, look, now we're in Egypt, of course. They say 2750 BCE, location Abydos, Egypt, purpose mortuary temple. I thought they weren't including crypts and stuff. I thought a mortuary temple would be kind of similar, but still standing, partially, mostly in ruins. And basically what you're seeing here is a bunch of nappy, nasty mud brick. How do you tell the evenness and oldness of it? They say in the description that, I think they said they began, around 2007, archaeologists started a project to restore Shunet el Zabib to its former glory, because, of course, everything being old in Egypt and the Middle East, or us perceiving it being old or built by people who were super smart, just goes to serve their establishment story and model. So everyone out there that are teaching the Bible or anything about the history of man that wants to bring you over to Mesopotamia or anywhere in the Middle East as origin stories are full of shit, and they are following the establishment narrative. So 3 Tarxian temples, more, lots of stone. Here we got beautiful cut stone and cobblestone. I'm not saying that you can't use the two together on the same site and get differing results based on what it is exactly you need. These cut stones are going to be far better for something structural, of course, and the cobblestones not as much. Cobblestones are actually quite pretty. If you put together a cobblestone wall, it can be quite pretty, unless you get up into northern Michigan in certain areas where there's so much stone in the soil, and there's so much stone, it's ridiculous that people have taken to using it on like their entire houses. Like there's just the whole houses just have cobblestone exterior. And not saying that it's not pretty, it's just when you see so freaking many of them, you just go, oh my God, that is a lot of stone-covered houses. My goodness, I wonder what the footers had to look like for all of these houses. I'm not kidding. And they're common houses too. So obviously, I'm just going to tell you that houses like that you see in these areas of northern Michigan, houses like that were known to, of course, have been built in 2000 BCE. So we can confidently say that all of those houses are probably from about 2000 BCE. How do I know? Because I said so. And I wrote it and I put it in a book, and that makes it official. This is the double Gantija Guntia temples. It's Malta, and again, it serves their purpose and their model very well. Looks like shit. And again, it doesn't matter what my opinion is of these things and how they look. That's not what matters. What matters is you cannot positively date them. They are stone. And even if they have mortar, you cannot possibly positively date that mortar. You can't do it. They can't do it. You have to take their word for it. And the last one is in Scotland. Papa Westray, Orkney, Scotland. And again, what was it at one time? Who knows? How old is it? Who knows? Because anyone could come along and build something very similar very recently, and you would not know the difference. Who knows? You have to take their word for it based on style. So, I'll close this. And here's the thing. I just punched in a little search about just old impressive buildings in America. Okay? And I'm just going to take you through a few. This first one, a lot of people would recognize. This is the Biltmore Estate. This is in North Carolina. And it is, it's stunning. The Biltmore Estate is absolutely, amazingly, unbelievably stunning looking. You could probably fire cannons and rain down fire almost endlessly on the Biltmore Estate and have it nearly in ruins, the roof gone and parts of walls and buildings gone and everything else. And if I looked at it, I would not think it looked like a fairy shat it out. I would see magnificent design, intelligence, and craftsmanship in the building of such an amazing structure and place, the whole compound. The next thing is, let me make sure I get this right, sorry. Alabama State Capitol, Montgomery, Alabama. Not Greenbow, Alabama. Montgomery, Alabama. Beautiful building. Absolutely gorgeous, beautiful work. Mostly stone and other materials that cannot be positively dated. In fact, I would say pretty much all materials that cannot be positive. What are you going to positively date? Any of the type of stone? The block, the brick, if there is brick in here, a lot of it covered brick. Covered brick's going to last for a hell of a long time, painted brick, because you're completely sealing it now. Again, all you have to do from that point forward is pretty much make sure you're not getting any infiltration by moisture and water to it behind the paint, and keep up that protective coating. So what are you going to date it by? The iron? Fat chance. Again, you'd have to go by, they would say, well, that iron could have been produced at this place at this point in time by this company and so on and so forth, and they can't prove it. Prove it. Prove it. Because you can't by the materials involved. It has to be because they say so. Okay, this is definitely not old. But I didn't, I think what I did was I punched in impressive instead of old. But still, these things, Yeah, we know that architecturally, these are the kinds of things that we're going to see more nowadays. Maybe because a lot of these designs are ridiculous and kind of useless, and the older designs look a lot less ridiculous and a lot more useful. Something that would seem far more modern, but hey, it's hard to date that either. The thing is, with much more recent buildings, the records of which and the people that actually worked on them and so on and so forth get to be a lot more trustworthy. And then we're going to get into a lot of things that would appear to be built a lot more recently. Fucking ugly. California Walt Disney Concert Hall. That's ugly. Colorado Air Force Academy Cadet Chapel. Now that is impressive. I gotta know when they say they built that. Do they say? It opened in 1963. It's the most visited man-made attraction in Colorado. Really? That's beautiful. I'd like to see some pictures of it being built. It's just really impressive looking. Look at that thing. I didn't even know it existed. Unfortunately, not all of this is quite old. Delaware Grand Opera House, Wilmington. Look at that. Now that is impressive. That is beautiful. That will last, and I'm going to say it, forever. If it's taken care of. Forever. Which means not only from this point forward, as long as they don't bring certain demographics into this neighborhood that they know will ruin this place and all the buildings around it, which is what they do when they want to ruin historic districts of specifically in America. Maybe they're doing that in Europe too. You can let me know if you're in Europe and you see the same sorts of things. It's very concerning that they do that. But it could last forever. Oh no, this was built when was it built? 1871. 1871. A few years after the Civil War. You know, the survivors got together, most of them with one hand, one leg, and they built this. Of course they did. Of course they did. Just ask the earwig. He'll tell you. They had factories that could mass produce these beautiful stone plinths and dental moldings and all of that. They could just mass produce them. Of course they did. Kidding me? Love these beautiful corner buildings. The architecture is just fantastic. Don't know if this is claimed to be recent, but it looks like it could be very old. It's hard to say. 1897. Love that stuff. Idaho State Capitol, Boise, Idaho. What a building. How do you date it? You date it based on how old they tell you it is. That's how you date it. Iowa State Capitol. Look at this building. And somehow, with all of this detail, oh no, buildings in Europe are far, far, far older than in America. Bullshit. Kansas State Capitol, Topeka. What an amazing building. How old is it? Ask them. They know. Oh, Churchill Downs. I've never been to Churchill Downs, actually. So I don't know. And they're just really showing just one portion of stands with I have no idea. They say it's the grandstand, which was designed by architect Joseph Dominic Baldes in 1895. So, just given that date, it's a little suspect. Louisiana, St. Louis Cathedral. Sorry, Saint, not street. Saint. It's the same as street. St. Louis Cathedral, New Orleans. Hey, now we got one. Wait, worshippers have been visiting the site of St. Louis Cathedral since 1727. Now, there's an old one. There's one they claim to be really old. And who's to say they're telling us the truth? I'm here to tell you it's not. Now, look, the current structure was built in 1850s. Oh, if I had just read the next sentence. Why? They constantly do that. You know that, right? I showed you that one. It was the, I think it was actually the little church building that I had visited in Gladstone in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Always, always, always this story that, well, the first one was built in the 1700s, and then for some reason it's, burned down, was destroyed. We just decided we needed a new one and built the new one when? 1800s. Main Portland Observatory. Yeah, that's pretty. Again. Wow. Maryland George Peabody Library, Baltimore. Baltimore. Think about Baltimore. What demographic have they moved in massive numbers to a lot of very historic districts in Baltimore and other cities of the world? And it is nefarious what they're doing. I know this being from Northwest Indiana. I saw it in some of the most historic areas of Northwest Indiana. One of the most historic areas of Northwest Indiana is Gary. Absolutely beautiful. How are you going to date this? You take care of wood, you keep it sealed up, do maintenance to it. How are you going to date it? Same thing with the wrought iron. How are you going to date it? The floors, how are you going to date it? I don't care if they're tile, they're marble, whatever they are. How you gonna date it? I know. I'm getting so repetitive. These are just such beautiful, beautiful, beautiful buildings. And I just, keep thinking back to this guy said very innocently, and here we got in Michigan, there are some amazing buildings that used to be standing in Detroit, Michigan, but wouldn't you know it, those areas have, turned to disuse, more than just buildings. The industry of Detroit and from the Upper Peninsula, and down through the lakes, through the rivers to Detroit, massive, massive, massive industries. The Ford Rouge complex. Detroit had some of the most impressive buildings you could ever imagine. The Fisher Building, Detroit. I got this book that I bought about all of these buildings in Detroit that used to be so magnificent and have fallen to disrepair, and so many of them, of course, have been vandalized. Spray paint all over the insides of them, words spelled incorrectly. So you figure that out. But I'm here to tell you, it is 1,000% erroneous to believe that the buildings in Europe are somehow far older than those in North America. And keep in mind, plenty of old buildings in North America have been destroyed in just the last century or two. Destroyed. Under one pretext or another. So, with that, I'm right near an hour, so I'm going to wrap this up. And it was just kind of one of those things. And, hey. Oh, yeah. Look, just do me a favor for the algorithm. Leave a comment, like. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. I know everybody says this, right? For the longest time, I didn't say it until I realized how it actually is supposed to theoretically help the algorithm, because I'd like to get this material in front of more people. Why? Because I'm making shekels hand over fist? No, it's not. I don't make really anything off these, and I've never really produced a lot of anything that I sell. But this information is important, so I appreciate it. If you would, thank you. See you next time.